From Adesanya breakdancing in his opponent's face to Jones cross-chopping DC's hopes, post-fight celebrations can get pretty disrespectful. Let's look at all the times UFC fighters got a little too caught up in the excitement of victory, like when Lesnar made sure everyone knew how much he hated Mir. Lesnar is most certainly a big man with an even bigger temper. Who can forget the time he stormed into the octagon just to shove DC for a call-out? Well, that little incident is pennies compared to the animosity between him and Frank Mir. Coming into UFC 100, Mir was pretty confident in his ability to take down the Beast Incarnate, especially since he had managed just that a year and a half ago. Unfortunately, that confidence manifested in an insane amount of trash talk and mockery, all of which was directed towards Lesnar in the build-up towards the fight, which you can bet the quick-tempered heavyweight saw as the worst possible form of insult. Rock got his revenge though, brutalizing Mir in less than 2 minutes and successfully defending his title. Obviously, he could have stopped there, but this wouldn't be much of a list then, would it? In a shocking display of disrespect, Lesnar went around the ring screaming insults at Mir, ones that would have made a sailor blush. He then proceeded to flip the entire crowd off, and went on to tell Joe Rogan that he had essentially performed extensive colonoscopy surgery on Mir. Yikes! It's no surprise that Mir has been quiet as a mouse and staying the hell out of the heavyweight's way ever since. Animosity between fighters is great fuel for post-fight drama. Who could forget Masvidal clowning Askren after the coldest finish in history?
Game Bread is in the building, and these guys just flapping gums at each other any chance they get. The fight clock is brought to you by Modelo. One of the greatest knockouts you'll ever see!
Oh my goodness!
Askren stiff as a board!
Oh my goodness!
Usually fighters are pretty chill dudes. They get a little concerned when they brutally knock their opponents out cold. The thing is, there was a negligible amount of love lost between Masvidal and Askren during UFC 239, so any kind of respect was pretty unlikely. The two had been throwing barbs and insults at each other for weeks. Of course, it's no secret that Askren isn't the most well-liked person in the UFC. Now, fans usually like to see the animosity build up over multiple rounds, but Masvidal clearly had other ideas. In what was the fastest knockout in UFC history, Jorge delivered a flying knee to Askren's face. The kick dropped him faster than a sack of potatoes. You'd think being the victim of what might as well be a homicide would be embarrassing enough for Ben. However, the victor decided to turn the disrespect up. Throwing himself to the floor next to his opponent, Jorge began mockingly tapping the canvas. He kept asking Ben why he wasn't talking anymore. The clownery didn't stop there, of course. Gamebred decided to extend the stand-up comedy to impressionism. As he was being announced the winner, he kept raising his knee at Funky, and even mimed the way he fell to the floor out cold. Remember kids, never ever antagonize your opponent, especially if there's any chance of them doing anything that embarrassing to you. At least Askren got off much easier than some fighters. Remember when Adesanya had to be pulled off of Costa for getting too handsy? The Stylebender is generally known as a pretty rambunctious dude, inside and outside the octagon. I'm sure you guys are familiar with his wild, controversial tweets and memes. Of course, he doesn't just contain his wild antics to the internet, as Costa unfortunately found out at UFC 253, given the bad blood between the two in the lead-up to the match. Everyone was already sure something dramatic would happen once the dust settled, and boy oh boy was that thought the understatement of the year. Adesanya put on a style clinic during the fight, landing a spectacular knockout that sent Costa to the floor in the second round. Now, it's not rare for refs to have to pull fighters off of their downed opponents. Israel made sure to make his mark on the celebration reel. Yeah, he straight up just started dry humping his rival right there on the canvas, until thankfully the referee dragged him off. You'd think that this would be disrespectful enough, but the Stylebender clearly wanted to take it up a few more notches. Not only did he basically start busting moves and breakdancing around his opponent, then he decided to take the disrespect to Costa's whole corner and began making some, unsavory motions towards them. He said some pretty eyebrow-raising things to Costa's coach. It's no wonder Costa was less irked by the loss than upset by whatever that celebration was supposed to be. Of course, it's nothing compared to what's coming next, when Bisping called Rockhold a free win. Some part of me can't really blame Bisping for his celebration over Rockhold in the aftermath of UFC 199. The legendary fighter took the match on extremely short notice, with only 17 days to prepare for his bout against the middleweight champ. What ensued was an absolute clinic, with Bisping knocking Rockhold out in just the first round. Now, the count had been submitted by this very opponent just 2 years prior, so you can bet he was pretty pumped over the win. Unfortunately, said pump came at the expense of making Rockhold's reputation, making him look like the UFC's very own freebie fighter. What ensued was a celebration that seemed designed to mock the former champion, tailor-made to keep him from ever entering the octagon again. He began by climbing on top of the octagon and mocking his opponent, hurling expletives at him like he owed him money. That's not all, he kept asking the fighter if he even knew where he was, proceeding to laugh at his injured opponent over and over. To put the cherry on top, when asked for his thoughts in the post-fight interview, Bisping had one very simple, devastating response. "That was easy. That was the easiest fight of my life." Of course, this is nothing compared to one of the most disrespectful things the UFC world has ever witnessed in the octagon, referring, of course, to Jones's cross-chop victory over DC. The ballad of John Jones and Daniel Cormier has been one sung through the halls of fighting sports for years. There's always been little love lost between the two heavyweight giants. In fact, they once almost came to blows during a pre-fight media day, with Jones even threatening to throw a stool at DC once. Fans were expecting something pretty explosive to happen at the end of UFC 182, and boy were they served. Bones absolutely dominated DC, to the point where his victory became a foregone conclusion by the last round. In a stunning display of disrespect, he didn't even fight to the last second, focusing instead on mocking DC. After the dust settled and he emerged victor, he aimed a devastating WWE-based cross-chop victory pose at the loser. DC was obviously in shambles after, and the two have hated each other ever since. Funnily enough, the victor isn't always the one engaging in post-fight celebrations. Let's look at McGregor's broken leg train of insults towards Dustin Poirier. Yeah, I know that McGregor did anything but win his last fight against Poirier. The man had a broken leg on the canvas after all. The thing is, I can't not mention Conor here. After all, the man was so sure he might as well have won the match. The Irishman alternated between telling Joe Rogan that he was the clear true victor and insulting Poirier's wife to his face, calling back to the insulting moment he insinuated his wife was having an affair with Conor. Now Poirier clearly had the last laugh, but there's something to be said about McGregor's confidence, given that he converted a loss into one of the most disrespectful post-fight kind of celebrations in history. Never break character, Conor. Well, folks, that's all the most disrespectful post-fight celebrations in UFC history.